So many things you've been taught about photography and video lighting simply aren't true. In this video, I'm going to run through a few photography lighting myths that you may not realise because a lot of people start to believe these things. The more you hear these things come up, the more they tend to be believable. And eventually they become truth, even though it's total rubbish. Now, my background is in physics and engineering, so I like to understand the principles of things that I use. I like to try them out to see if it works. I don't just take somebody's word for it. And I tell my students to do this as well. If you hear something that's interesting that you want to try, give it a go and make sure that what you're learning is true, because otherwise you could be just wasting your time. Now, the basic principle that we work on with photography, I'm talking mostly about stills, but this applies to video as well. The basic principle is hard light versus soft light. Now, the law is, or the rule is, or the assumption is, that hard light comes from a small light source, such as a speedlight, or a light bulb, or a very small LED light. That would be hard light. Hard light tends to throw distinct shadows. Look at these images. These are shot with hard light. You can see the distinct shadows in the background. You can see the distinct shadows on the model's face and figure. So hard light comes from a small light source. Soft light comes from a large light source. Now, there are degrees of all of these things. Soft light can be really soft, like this softbox over here, or it can be moderately soft, like this one over my left shoulder. So the size of the light source is proportional to the softness or the hardness of it. We've got a whole range of hardness and softness. We can't just say this one's hard, this one's soft. Now, the ultimate soft light source would be an overcast sky outdoors, because it's lit by the sun, but the sun is diffused over that whole cloud area in the sky, so the light's coming from all different directions. We can't see any distinct shadows. On the beach, on a cloudy day, you can't see your shadow, because it's there, but you just can't see it because it's diffused by all of those light directions. A hard light outdoors will be the direct sunlight, because the sun is very small in relation to us here on Earth. So it's the ultimate hard light source. When you look at your shadow on a beach on a bright sunny day, it's very distinct. You can see that transition, that very quick transition from dark shadow to bright highlight on the sand. So hard light comes from a small light source, soft light comes from a large light source. This is not a photographic principle, this is a physical law. It's the law of physics that we go by, and that's truth and that's honest. Now, when all of these myths come into the equation is when people claim that a small light source is soft. We know it's not right. I know it's not right, because that small light source can only give hard light unless we modify it some way. Now, a lot of people, when they're using flash, be it on camera or off camera, they put something over the front of their flash to make it softer. Now, most of the things people put over their flash is not going to make any difference at all. The first thing people tend to do is to pull out this little plastic flap here and stick it on, because people think that softens the light. It doesn't, because it doesn't increase the size of the light source. This little flap here on the front of your flash simply spreads it out wider. It won't make any difference to the shadows in your image, won't make any difference to the softness of your image, because it hasn't increased the size of the light source. The next thing people do is use one of these little cones that we get for free when we get our flashes. That can go over the front of your flash, and people assume that's going to give you a softer light. It doesn't. Myth. That doesn't happen. Simply because we haven't increased the size of the light source here. Now, it will soften light in one particular situation. If you're in a white room and you have this little cone on the front, it will spread light out to all of the walls and ceiling, and it will reflect off those walls and ceiling and give you a little bit of a softer light, because it's a larger light source bouncing off all those walls. But if you're outdoors or in a studio like I have that is relatively dark, this is not going to make an ounce of difference to the softness of your light. I see photographers all the time, wedding photographers, shooting in the park with this thing on the front. having it pointed upwards. It's not going to do anything either. You could bounce light off the sky if you're good enough, but it's not going to work because there's nothing there for the light to bounce off. So all this thing does is spread the light out wider, in the same way that your spreader spreads it out wider. Now, you can purchase various devices. They look like pieces of Tupperware. I haven't got one because I was too smart to buy one. This is an example. This is not a flash modifier. This is my wife's Tupperware container. But people stick these things over the front, up to maybe twice this size, and think that that's going to soften their light down. Well, it will slightly, because we have increased the size of the light source when we bounce into a little plastic thing like this, but it does almost nothing. You may get 4 times softer light by doing it this way, but simply using an umbrella or bouncing your light off a wall, you're going to get 100 times softer light. This is going to make almost no difference. So don't pay a lot of money for one of those little things that fits over the top of your flash and think that it's softening it. I've seen so many of these over the years, and generally they sell it with a before and after picture, and the before picture looks exactly the same as the after picture. It's just that people perceive it to be softer just because the people in the ad or the people in the video tell them it's softer. We've all experienced that before. If you want to use one of these devices, you don't have to pay a lot of money. This is how we get our milk in Australia, in plastic bottles. I can just simply put this over the top of my flash, and that will reflect that light into my milk bottle, and that will give me the same effect as buying a $200 or $300 little Tupperware container to do it. So this is going to soften your light a little bit. As I said, there are gradations of softness, but it's not going to do anything like having a cheap umbrella. $40 umbrella is going to give you way more softness than something like this. So that's one myth busted. To anyone who wants to shoot a wedding with a milk bottle on top of their flash to soften the light down, you're welcome to it. I'd like to hear it in the comments if you're brave enough to give it a go. Now, I mentioned at the beginning that hard light comes from a small light source, soft light comes from a large light source. Now, this does depend on how close that light is to your subject. The basic thing is that the size of the light source relative to your subject will give you that hard or soft light. So if I use a softbox like this, very close to me, it is a large light source in relation to me. If I move this 20 metres back that way, it becomes a hard light source. It changes the whole characteristic of that light. Here, the shadows are going to be soft and more subtle. Way back there, those shadows are going to be very sharp and harsh, the same as they would with a smaller light source. So you can vary the softness of your light by moving it closer or further away from your subject. The next myth I want to bust that I see all the time on sponsored videos about lighting, particularly LED lighting, is that the photographer will have a 60-watt LED light that's this big and rave about how super powerful it is. I couldn't believe how powerful this light was. A 60-watt light is 60 watts. It's not going to give you 600 watts out of that light. So there's going to be very little difference between brands of 60-watt light. If you modify it a little bit, you can put it in a cone reflector, or you can put it in something that's going to push a lot of that light forwards rather than out to the side, then that will change it. But the actual wattage of the unit is not going to change. It's not going to make it hugely powerful that you can overpower the sun with this little 60-watt LED light. The same thing goes with flash. If you've got a little 15-watt flash, it's not going to be as powerful as a 100-watt Speedlight. It's just not going to happen. So don't believe people who tell you that's the case. The next myth is to do with softboxes. Now, a softbox is a light source with a diffuser on the front. Usually a large umbrella type softbox has a diffuser on the front. Once you take that diffuser off, it becomes an umbrella. Okay? No diffusion on the front, it's an umbrella. So as soon as you put diffusion on any light, it becomes a softbox. If you have a beauty dish, for instance, that a lot of people love, I'm not a big fan of beauty dishes, but people love the characteristics of the beauty dish, the quick fall off to the edges, the uneven light that comes out of them, which I'm not real keen on. But as soon as you use that beauty dish and stick a diffuser on the front, a white sock, it simply becomes a softbox. You lose all of the characteristics of that particular reflector. And the same with any other type of softbox. If you've got a deep dish softbox, they may call it a parabolic. It's probably not a parabolic, but they'll call it a deep dish softbox. If you have that diffusion on the front, it doesn't make any difference what shape it is. A shallow one or a deep one is going to give you exactly the same light. Once you take that diffuser off and you've only got that umbrella shape there, that's when a deep dish one will push more light forwards. A shallow one will push more light out to the side. So they have particular characteristics. The interior surface of that light too makes a bit of a difference. If you've got a dimpled surface on the inside, like a lot of more expensive units have, umbrellas and softboxes, that light's going to be a little bit more diffused simply because of that uneven surface. If you have simply the straight facets, the flat facets with silver fabric, you're going to get a little bit more uneven reflection off there. I'm going to do a video in the future to talk about this. A lot of photographers say that silver interiors are more specular. I don't think they are more specular. I think it's just those individual facets throwing highlights in different parts of the image that make it appear a bit more specular, a bit more high contrast. But anyway, I'll do an experiment with that and I'll let you know later. So take the diffusion off, it's an umbrella. Put the diffusion on, it's a softbox. While we're on the subject of parabolic reflectors or parabolic softboxes or umbrellas, most of the products that are called parabolics are not parabolics. A parabola is a particular shape. It's a mathematical equation. It's a geometric shape that has particular properties. A parabola, when you have light coming out from the nodal point in the parabola, it will focus that light so that all of those lights are parallel coming out the front. You'll see an example here. That's the parabolic principle. Once you start moving that light in and out, it goes all over the place. So even true parabolics, which you'll find around nowadays, I still can't see how they are much of a benefit. Even though a lot of photographers say, oh, it's really good, I like it, nobody's really been able to explain to me how they're any better. And the results that I've seen don't look any different than using a softbox the same size. I know you can get hard light and soft light from them, but I can do that with two different softboxes that I don't have to pay $2,000 for. But anyway, I may be wrong. Let me know in the comments if I am. But I haven't seen anything. As I say, I've got a background in physics and engineering. I can't see any way that that parabolic, true parabolic system would be worth spending that amount of money on. So your basic parabolic deep dishes aren't parabolics. They're just deep dish. They work a little bit more efficiently, but as soon as you put that diffusion on, they're softbox the same as everything else. The next myth that you've been told is that feathered light is softer. I've seen so many photographers say that they feather their light to get a softer light. Now, a feathered light means that you're not pointing your light directly at your subject. You're pointing it a little bit away from your subject so that you can darken your background down a little bit. You may point your light a little bit away from your background. It's still lighting your subject indirectly, but most of that light's going in front of your subject rather than to light the background. You can feather your light downwards or upwards. I often feather my light upwards when I'm outdoors because I don't want to get too much light on the grass in front of my model. I want to just keep that a little bit darker, so I feather the light a bit up above her head. She's still being lit by the light, but I'm controlling where that light pool hits the subject or hits the environment. But as soon as I start turning that light away from my subject, that light source becomes smaller in relation to her. And I can show you here. You can see this. As soon as I start to feather this light away from you, you're the subject in this image. So imagine you're sitting there, I'm photographing you. I'm turning that light, I'm feathering that light away from you to control the light on the background. That light source becomes smaller. And there's no way to get away from that. There's no way that's going to be a softer light than pointing that softbox directly at your subject. So that's a myth. Feathered light isn't softer. The next myth that irks me a little bit, it's true in some situations, but most of the time it's not. How many times have you seen a photographer say that you should put your light 45 degrees around to the side and 45 degrees upwards? I mean, 45 degrees to me, particularly the upwards one, is just way over the top. Most people's eye sockets will be fairly dark if that light's coming down at 45 degrees. 45 degrees to me is up about this sort of an angle. So I've got relatively deep set eyes, so that means that that light's not getting in my eyes, it's just too dark. If I had my false eyelashes on, which I don't wear very often, but that would cover my eyes even more. And if I don't get light into those eyes, then you can't see the personality of the person. So 45 degrees to me is way too high. I might use a highlight source for a particular reason if I want my subject to be looking upwards in the image. But I don't want to place it up there, which would force me to turn my subject's face up for no reason at all. I generally have my lights maybe 15, 20 degrees above the eye line of my subject, and that works out fine. Pretty much everything I shoot, all of these images here, that light source has been about 15 to 20 degrees above the subject. 45 degrees around to the side is fine as well if you want that 3/4 frontal light. Now you can vary the light on your subject obviously by turning their face one way or the other, towards the light or away. So it's not always going to hit their face at 45 degrees. But again, I tend to prefer less than that, maybe 20, 30 degrees as a standard lighting setup. I mean, we vary lights all over the place, so we're not going to shoot everything the same. But generally 20 to 30 degrees is my starting point, 10 to 15 degrees up, and that's my basic lighting setup to start my session. But because I shoot a lot of beauty, a lot of my images are lit directly from the front because I want that paramount, that frontal lighting. So don't always, I mean, there are probably some of you there who actually use a set square and go for that 45 degree angle. I don't think it's a good idea. If you have someone who has deep set eyes, that light is up way too high. If you have someone who has very flat eye sockets, that height on that light could be a benefit because you're throwing a little bit more shadow up under the eyebrow here and making those eyes appear to recede a little bit into those eye sockets. So that may be a benefit, but most of the time, forget 45 degrees. The last myth I want to talk about in this video is to do with grids. A lot of people think when you put a grid over a light, it makes it into a harder light source. Now, if we've got this beauty dish, for instance, this small beauty dish, I've got the grid on the front of here. When you put a grid over a light source, such as this beauty dish, the reason you would do it, or the main reason you would do it, would be to concentrate that light a little bit more, to prevent the spread of light. It's not going to soften the light or harden the light because the light source is exactly the same size. All the grid does is restrict the spread of that light to other parts of your scene. The same with this softbox behind me here. The grid's on it simply to stop it spreading onto my background or my foreground or other parts of my subject. It hasn't changed the size of the light source, it's simply concentrated a little bit more in a smaller area. So grids don't harden light, they don't soften light. The light stays exactly the same because the light source is the same size. Now, another purpose of using a grid, one that not a lot of people think about, is that it can prevent lens flare. So if you're my subject, you're standing there, I want to highlight you from the back. So I want to put a light in behind you there. That light is coming towards the camera, which oftentimes can cause flare in my shot. If a bright light source is hitting the front of my lens, I tend to get lens flare. So the grid will help prevent that as well. It doesn't change the softness of the light, it just prevents that light from hitting my camera and giving me lens flare. So that's why we often have strip boxes. There's a strip box just over here that you can see. It allows me to have that light coming across on an angle from the background to edge light my subject without that light impinging on my lens to give me lens flare. So if you have a strip box for that particular purpose, it's a good idea to put a grid on it. So that's it. There are a lot more myths to do with lighting in photography. I'm going to run through some outdoor myths in another video. These are all been pretty much studio-based things with lights and flashes, but there are a lot of outdoor myths as well. So we'll touch on that in the future. Hopefully you've enjoyed this. I'll see you next time.